I'm Dawn Hill, host of Heart, Mind, and Purpose, a podcast where we explore what it means to live an aligned and wholehearted life. I am a professional counselor with over 25 years of experience and a deep love for meaningful conversation. I bring you honest reflections, soulful questions, and meaningful tools for managing life. Whether you're seeking clarity, connection, or simply a space to breathe, this podcast is here for you. Tune in weekly and join me on the journey.
Welcome to Heart, Mind, and Purpose, the podcast where we explore how our inner lives shape the way we love, connect, and grow. Hi, this is Paul Gramercy, producer of today's episode, where Dawn explores something that impacts every relationship in our lives, but often goes unnoticed: emotional maturity. What does it really look like to grow up emotionally, not just in age, but in how we respond to stress, conflict, disappointment, and connection? Dawn walks us through the difference between reacting and responding, how our past shapes our present, and what it actually takes to build a sturdier, more grounded inner life. If you've ever wondered why some situations feel bigger than they should, or how to handle emotions with more clarity and calm, this episode is for you. This episode is called Why Some Adults Still React Like Children: Emotional Maturity. Now here's your host, Dawn Hill.
Welcome back to Heart, Mind, and Purpose. Today we're talking about something that gets mentioned a lot these days, but I am not always sure we slow down enough to really understand it, and that is emotional maturity. We hear phrases like emotional intelligence, emotional health, emotional immaturity, self-awareness, triggers, boundaries, healing, and growth. And while all of those words are important, sometimes they can start to sound like buzzwords if we're not careful. So today I want to ask you a simple question. What does emotional maturity actually look like in real life? And why some adults still react like children? Not in theory, not in a self-help quote, and not in the perfect version of ourselves we wish we were, but in everyday life, at home, at work, in conflict, in disappointment, in relationships, when we are stressed, when we are hurt, and when life does not go the way we thought it would. Because emotional maturity is not about never getting upset. It is not about becoming stoic, and is not about suppressing your feelings and pretending everything is fine. Emotional maturity is about learning to understand your emotions, regulate them, express them wisely, and respond with more intention than impulse. And that work matters deeply because the quality of our lives is deeply tied to the quality of our relationships with ourselves, with God, and with other people. So emotional maturity is not the same thing as never having emotions. One of the biggest misunderstandings about emotional maturity is that mature people don't get rattled. They do not get emotional. They do not struggle, and somehow they stay calm all the time, and that is simply not true. Emotionally mature people still feel deeply. They still get hurt. They still feel disappointed. They still get angry, and they still feel anxious, sad, embarrassed, frustrated, overwhelmed, and uncertain. The difference is not that they never feel those things. The difference is that they begin to notice what they feel and choose how to respond rather than being taken over by the first reaction. A simple way to say this would be, emotional maturity means being able to stay present when something feels hard. It means your adult self can stay in the room, even when an older, younger, or wounded part of you gets stirred up. And that is no small thing, because many of our strongest reactions are not really about this moment alone. They are connected to old patterns, old hurts, old fears, old roles, and old beliefs. Something happens in the present, but the body remembers something from the past. And emotional maturity is what helps us say, this feeling makes sense, but I can choose what I do now. I would now like to look at emotional intelligence and emotional maturity and how they are related, but not exactly the same. Now, I do want to make one distinction here, because people often use emotional intelligence and emotional maturity as if they are identical. They are related, but they are not quite the same. Emotional intelligence is more like a skill set. It is the ability to notice emotions, understand them, read a room, empathize, communicate, and navigate relationships. And that matters at home, and it matters at work, and it matters in the rest of our life. In fact, research keeps showing that emotional intelligence plays a significant role in workplace health and success. It improves communication, teamwork, adaptability, leadership, and job satisfaction. People with higher emotional intelligence often stay calmer under pressure, work better with others, and handle stress more effectively. But emotional maturity is the lived experience of those skills. It is what emotional intelligence looks like when life gets hard. It is one thing to know how emotions work. It is another thing to actually regulate yourself when you are frustrated, to take responsibility when you've hurt someone, to hear feedback without falling apart, to stay kind when you are disappointed, to apologize without drowning in shame, or to choose what is healthy instead of what is merely familiar. So in some ways, emotional intelligence gives us the tools, and emotional maturity is what happens when we actually use those tools. You may be wondering what emotional maturity looks like in real life. So let me make this plain and practical. What does emotional maturity actually look like? Simply put, it looks like pausing before reacting. You feel your heart race. You feel your body tense. You feel the urge to snap, shut down, defend, or retreat. And instead of reacting immediately, you take a deep breath. That pause may only be a few seconds, but it can change the whole moment. It looks like taking responsibility without collapsing into shame. You can say, "I'm sorry I hurt you," without turning into, "I'm a terrible person." You can learn from the mistake instead of drowning in the guilt. It looks like setting boundaries calmly. You can say no without being harsh. You can say yes without resentment. Or you can speak honestly about what does and does not work for you. It looks like letting other people feel differently. Someone can disagree with you and you do not fall apart. You may not enjoy it, but you understand that difference does not automatically mean rejection. It looks like repairing after conflict, not pretending nothing happened, not staying stuck in pride, and not keeping score, but coming back to saying, "We can try again." It looks like feeling your emotions without numbing them. Instead of overworking, over-explaining, overeating, scrolling, shopping, avoiding, or shutting down, you can begin staying with your emotions long enough to understand what is really happening. It looks like letting go of old roles. Maybe you were a fixer, or the peacekeeper, or the strong one, the responsible one, or the one who always made everyone else okay. Emotional maturity means you begin stepping out of those roles that no longer serve your health and growth. And maybe most importantly, emotional maturity looks like choosing what is healthy over what is merely familiar. Because often the nervous system prefers what feels known, even if it's painful. Growth requires learning to choose what is good, not just what is familiar. Sometimes the clearest way to understand maturity is to look at what it is not. Emotional maturity often shows up as patterns like blaming others for your emotions or problems, refusing accountability, reacting impulsively without thinking through the consequences, overreacting to day-to-day frustrations, frequent emotional outbursts, depending on others to constantly steady your inner world, avoiding conflict or avoiding difficult conversations, becoming defensive quickly, struggling to empathize, taking everything personally, being overly rigid, easily offended, or controlled by the ego. Now, all of us do some of these things at some times, and that does not automatically mean we are emotionally immature. We are human. Stress affects us, grief affects us, burnout affects us, transitions in life affect us, illness affects us, and lack of sleep affects us. So this is not about being perfect or labeling. It is about noticing patterns over time. asking yourself questions like, where do I tend to get stuck? Where do I tend to regress? Or where do I tend to react from an old place instead of responding from a grounded one? That kind of honesty is part of maturity too. Emotional maturity does not develop in a vacuum. A lot of things shape it. Childhood experiences matter. The emotional environment we were raised in matters. How caregivers handled stress, conflict, affection, and repair all matter. Parental modeling matters too. We've learned a lot by watching. If the adults around us shut down, exploded, avoided everything, never apologized, over-controlled, or denied emotions altogether, we often carry those patterns forward unless we've become aware of them and choose differently. Trauma and adversity matter too. Stressful or painful experiences can either stunt growth, distort our coping, or sometimes accelerate maturity in certain ways, but not always in healthy ways. Education and awareness matter. The more we learn about emotions, our nervous system, coping, triggers, attachment, communication, and healing, the more options we have to respond in emotionally healthy ways. Social relationships matter. Healthy friendships, mentors, therapy, community, a church, and emotionally safe people can all help us grow. Culture matters. Cultural messages matter. Some of us were taught to hide feelings. Some of us were taught to be and stay pleasing. Some were taught to toughen up, and some were taught to never need anything. Mental health matters too. Anxiety, depression, trauma, personality patterns, and chronic stress can all deeply affect emotional regulation. If someone struggles with emotional maturity, the answer is not simply try harder. The better question is, what shaped this, and what might help it to grow now? Now, I also want to say something about the workplace because emotional maturity is not just a personal life issue. It matters at work too. In fact, emotional maturity and emotional intelligence shape so much of what happens in a professional setting. They affect communication, collaboration, leadership, adaptability, conflict resolution, resilience under pressure, team health, morale, productivity, and job satisfaction. People who are emotionally mature often communicate more cleanly and handle stress more steadily and work through resistance and team dynamics with more wisdom. They tend to be better listeners, stay calmer under pressure, own their own mistakes, receive feedback with less defensiveness, adapt more quickly to change, and influence others with steadiness rather than chaos. This is one reason emotional maturity is a powerful leadership quality. And this is not just for bosses or executives. It matters whether you are leading a team, serving on a team, working in an office, running a business, managing a home, or volunteering in your community. The ability to understand your own emotions, notice your triggers, communicate clearly, and stay reasonably grounded under stress is deeply valuable. It reduces unnecessary conflict, it strengthens teamwork, and it lowers stress, and it helps people feel safer around you. This may be one of the most important places emotional maturity shows up, because chemistry may bring people together, but emotional maturity is what helps relationships survive. That is true in marriages, friendships, in family, in work relationships, in ministry, and in ongoing connection where real people are trying to stay close over time. Emotionally mature people begin learning how to manage reactivity, listen without immediately defending, apologize and repair, self-correct, stay open to feedback, solve problems patiently, be reasonable, initiate connection, respect boundaries, and maintain their own sense of self while staying connected. That is the work, and it is work. It is not glamorous work. It is not instant work. It's not one breakthrough and then done. It is steady work over time. And the truth is, without this kind of maturity, relationships become much harder to sustain because emotional immaturity tends to make everything more fragile. Teasing feels devastating. Feedback looks and feels like rejection. Conflict feels catastrophic, and boundaries feel personal. Disappointments feel intolerable. Differences feel threatening. Emotional maturity helps us to hold more discomfort, more nuances, more imperfection, more ability to repair, more patience, and more humanity. This next part is subtle, but very important. Emotional maturity includes growing what we might call a healthy ego, not a big ego, not an inflated ego, not a fragile ego, but a healthy one. And that means becoming strong enough to not fall apart every time someone teases you, disagrees with you, or gives you feedback. It means you do not personalize everything. It does mean compliments do not have to define you, and criticism does not have to destroy you. A healthy ego can receive a compliment without becoming inflated, and it can receive feedback without collapsing. That is maturity, because the goal is not to become unaffected by people. The goal is to become rooted enough that external feedback does not control your whole sense of yourself. So when someone offers constructive feedback, the mature response is not, "How dare they?" or "I'm awful." The mature response is more like, "Let me hold that outside of myself for a moment. Let me reflect on it and see what is true here. What can I learn here? And what do I need to discard?" That's humility, and humility is one of the quiet marks of emotional maturity. Another part of emotional maturity is learning to loosen your grip on how we think life should go. And this is a hard one because all of us create a story in our mind. Stories about our future, stories about our relationships, stories about timing, and stories about how things are supposed to work out. And it is not wrong to have hopes or goals or desires, but emotional maturity means learning not to demand that reality match exactly what we pictured in our head. When we become too attached to an outcome and life does not cooperate, we can quickly fall into anxiety, resentment, disrepair, or controlling. Maturity does not mean becoming passive. It means learning to accept life on life's terms while still living with the purpose and hope. That kind of flexibility is deeply mature because it allows us to grieve honestly, adjust wisely, and keep going without becoming bitter or rigid. So how do we actually grow in this? It is not an overnight thing, not by trying to become a different person all at once, but in small moments that matters so much. Real change often happens in very small moments, little shifts at a time. When you notice your body before your reaction, when you take a slow breath instead of snapping, when you speak kindly to yourself, when you learn to say, "I'm sorry," when you come back after a conflict, when you sit down with discomfort without numbing it immediately, when you ask for help, when you tell the truth in love and kindness, when you set a boundary calmly, or when you choose awareness instead of reflex. Those repeated moments teach the nervous system something important. It teaches our nervous system to recognize, I am safe enough to pause. I do not have to react automatically. I can choose what I do now. And this is also where reparenting becomes meaningful. Not reliving every moment endlessly and not blaming everyone from the past forever, but noticing old patterns and offering yourself something new and steadier now. More compassion, more structure, more truth, more kindness, more honesty, more care. That is part of building a safer inner world. So let me make this very practical. Here are a few ways you can begin to grow in emotional maturity. Learn to identify your emotions. Not just "I'm upset," but try to define them more clearly, like "I'm embarrassed," or "I'm hurt," "I'm disappointed," or "I'm anxious," "I am ashamed," or "I feel frustrated," just to name a few. Naming emotions helps to slow impulsive interactions. Pause and notice what is happening in your body and your mind without judgment. This could be through prayer, breathing, stillness, journaling, walking, meditation, or simply slowing down long enough to take notice. Then set some healthy boundaries. Emotional maturity is not always about being always available or agreeable. It includes knowing what is healthy for you and communicating that clearly. Take ownership of your reality. Learn to ask yourself things like, what did I do to contribute here? What is mine to own? What do I need to repair? Or what do I need to change? Observe others with curiosity instead of reacting instantly. Try asking, what might be going on here? What is this bringing up in me? And how can I respond rather than just react? So learning to build emotional resilience. Discomfort does not always mean danger. That is such an important truth. We can learn to tolerate hard feelings without being ruled by them. Seek support. Therapy helps. Safe relationships help. Reading helps. Reflection helps. Spiritual depth helps. Mentors and emotionally healthy role models really help. Growth is personal work, but it rarely happens in total isolation. I would like to end with this because I think it matters deeply. Emotional maturity is not about becoming perfect. It is not never getting triggered, never crying, never feeling anxious, never making mistakes, or never saying the wrong thing. It is not about being polished. It is about becoming more honest, more aware, more responsible, more flexible, more compassionate, and more grounded. It is about becoming someone who can stay present long enough to choose. And that kind of maturity is a gift to your family, to your friendships, to your work, to your community, to your future, and to your own inner world. Because in the end, emotional maturity is not just about handling emotions well. It is about becoming the kind of person who can build a more peaceful, resilient, and honest life. One day at a time, one choice at a time, one conversation at a time, one repair at a time, and one pause at a time. That is the quiet work of growing up emotionally. So maybe this week, instead of asking yourself only, did I stay calm or did I do it perfectly? Maybe ask yourself something like this instead. Did I notice what I was feeling? Did I pause at least once? Did I tell the truth? Did I take responsibility? Did I show compassion to myself or someone else? Or did I choose what was healthy even if it felt unfamiliar? That is growth, not perfection, but growth. And over time, that kind of growth changes everything. So thank you for being with me here today on Heart, Mind, and Purpose. And if this episode resonated with you, I hope it gives you a few gentle places to reflect this week, not with shame, but with honesty and hope, and maybe share it with a friend. Until next time, may you be kind to your heart, clear in your mind, and grounded in your purpose. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of Heart, Mind, and Purpose. Emotional maturity isn't about getting it right every time. It's about becoming more aware, more intentional, and more grounded in how we show up in our lives and relationships. If this episode resonated with you, we invite you to slow down this week and notice just one moment where you pause, reflect, and choose your response. If you found this conversation helpful, we'd love for you to share it with someone who could use some encouragement. You can also find resources, listener handouts, and more at dawnmariehill.com. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the next episode as we keep exploring how the heart, the mind, and our sense of purpose all work together for a life well lived. If you have questions or comments, please contact Dawn at heartmindandpurpose.podcast@gmail.com. Until next time, thanks for listening.